Welcome to Site-to-Site OAuth Authentication from scratch. Hey, I'm Eric, and very soon you cannot use basic authentication to access Business Central web services anymore, at least in the cloud. And you're stuck with two options. Both of them are called OAuth, and it seems that it's way more complicated than just good old basic authentication, but perhaps it's not. But anyway, you have two options. You have OAuth login. So you have a user, the user is authenticating with OAuth, you get a token and off you go. But now you also have a second option, which is application login or site-to-site authentication, also using OAuth. And in all those cases where we got something running that needs to log in and do something with a web service and stuff like that, we don't want to involve a login procedure. And those were typically those cases where we use basic authentication, because you could store username and password and then everything was good. But that's gone very soon. So now your option for those cases are site-to-site OAuth. And in this video, I'm going to show you how you can do that. And I know there's lots of sometimes very complicated ways of doing this out there. And a lot of the documentation involves magic. And when I say magic, I mean there's a library that does something. You call a function and then, bam, everything happens. So what I'm going to do in this video is no libraries, no magic, just, hard code, and not very much code when it comes down to it, which is kind of my point, that why get a multi-megabyte DLL into your project if all you need is 20 lines of code. So anyway, but let's actually start here, Business Central, because we know, you and I know, that when something happens inside Business Central, it's done by a user. And now we just talked about that we're going to log into Business Central without a user. And so who is the user? And if we go into, I can click users here, right? We can see that there are already some users here, but I cannot create a new one. And actually what you do is that you go to Azure portal, open app registration, because we're going to register an app and this app will become the user. So I click new and I'll call this app for YouTube. And I'll just say accounts indigo organizational directory only, hogart.com. That's so this is the Azure portal that's connected. It sits in the same tenant as the sandbox I'm going to use. That's it. I'm just going to put in the name, say register. And so now we got, remember, we're replacing basic authentication, username and password. So now we actually got one of those components already. We have the application client ID, client ID, application ID. So this is your username, this thing right here. Think about that as your username. So we'll copy that, and I will just make a note on another screen so I got it. The next thing we need to tell Microsoft. So here is another thing that's different with OAuth, is that there's kind of two levels of permissions. And the first thing about, we know permissions inside Business Central, we'll get back to them in a second, but before that there's kind of a gatekeeper concept saying, well, if you are getting a token to be allowed to log into Microsoft services, which one are you allowed to log into? So we'll go to API permission and say, okay, if we're logging in, what can we do? Well, without specifying anything else, we are certainly allowed to read information about ourselves. But that's probably not enough. So we'll select add a permission and find Business Central here. I'll select that. And now we have the two options. So remember that we have two ways of logging in, authenticating with OAuth. One was as a user, that is known as a delegate permission. So we create a permission set, and whomever is logging in, this is the permission set you're given. But it's not really permissions per se. It's more permission to access the system, and then the system itself can decide what you can do. But that's not the case here. We'll actually use the other one, the application permission. So in this case, there is no user we are delegated as. We're just an application by ourselves. There's no user involved. So we'll select that one. And now we have three options. And the first one, if app access according to the application permissions in Business Central. And it's API read write all, that seems to work the way we want. So from a big Microsoft perspective, now this, if you can authenticate with this application ID, you are allowed to access Business Central. So first step, we are adding the permissions, and what you cannot see here behind my big head is that you need to grant admin consent. You can do this here, you can do it inside Business Central. I'm just going to do it here. So now it's done, granted, and I can turn my head back on. So now we have a username, the application client ID. We have what systems should you be able to access if you log in with this. So we need the last piece. We need the password, and the password is a secret. So we'll select certificates and secrets and click on give me a new secret, and I'll call the secret needs to have a description. So I'll call that YouTube also. You can specify how long it lives. So I'll just leave it at 6 months. And now we got two things, and one is a little hard to see behind my head, but that's a secret ID. That's not the one we need. We need the secret value, and we'll copy that to the clipboard. Notice that it's written here as 3 dots, so we cannot see the entire value. So don't copy this, because this is not enough. You need to copy here. And then we got, I'll just put it on another screen here. We got the entire value. So that's the application ID, username, the secret value, that's the password, and we opened up access to Business Central. So that was first step. Next step is that we actually go back into Business Central, and I'm just going to put, you see, we go back to overview here first. Just grab the application ID again, go in here, and we still cannot click new here. But if I go to tell me, I can open Azure Active Directory applications, and we can see I already have some, but I will create a new one, and then I will paste the client ID or the application ID into this field. The next field is way more important than it looks. It says description. That is, I'm not going to say it's a bug, but it certainly is misleading, because whatever you put in here becomes the username. The username that if from AL call user ID, the function called user ID, this is the value you'll get returned. If you look at the system created by, system modified by fields, this is the value that will be put into those fields. So description, not so much. Think about this as the username from the BC perspective. So I will call this guy for YouTube again. Now we need to give this permission. So even though we gave it some pseudo permission to access Business Central at all in Azure, we need to give real permissions. So I'll give it a premium group here for all companies, because I am such a nice guy, and then I'll give it super data. So you cannot give it super because that's not allowed, but you can give super data, so that's pretty close and good enough for what I want to do here. So now we have the app registration. Now we got the user set up inside Business Central. So now we're ready to write some code. And I have somewhere here prepared a small piece of C#. So in this case, I'm just going to use C#. Your mileage may vary, but what I'm going to do is I'm not going to use, as I said, I'm not going to use any of the fancy stuff. I'm going to do this as close to the middle as I can, so you can see how simple this process actually is, and you can replicate this in any language. So let's just, so we need a couple of things. So we got the client ID, and let me just paste that back in here so we have that. That was, oops, go away. There we go. Got the client ID. We got the, see, this is very clever. This is the new Visual Studio 2022 that with AI that predicts what I'm going to write, and because I played around with this before I started the video, is he's going to do one more called client ID or client secret. That's okay. And then we need one more, because we actually need the tenant ID also. So if we go back, so let me find, where is my Business Central? There it is. So we need the tenant ID for this. So that's it. So those are the three pieces we need to log in. Well, the first thing we need to do is, so normally when you use basic authentication, you would just supply a username, password, and do base64 thing, and then you pass it with the call to api.businesscentral.dynamics.com. But now you got to make a call to, and let's put that in here as a variable. So you got to make a call to HTTPS. It's called login.micro. Let's see if I can do this right. Microsoftonline.com / and then we need the tenant ID and /OAuth 2 /v2.0 /token. So that's where we're gonna do the login. And in order to do the login, remember in AL we got the HTTP client. There's several, and I got several videos on how to use the HTTP client, but you'll see that it basically works the same in C# as it does in AL, because it is the same. What we have in AL is just a wrapper for this guy. So what we need to send is basically this. The way we send it is to create a content. We create a post to this URL. So content is equal a new, then we can just do a, I don't think there is a URL, there is a form. Let's see if we can do this. What does this take? It takes a key value pair. So I'm not going to build it. You know what? I'm going to do it somewhere else. I'm going to do a string. String content. And then just pass the string, because that's how I usually do. So you need to supply 4 things here. We need to supply a grant type called client credentials. Then we need to supply a scope. So what is it that we're granting, asking for access to? And the scope is rather weird, because it's actually the URL. So I'll do API businesscentral.dynamics.com, and then it ends in a weird way because you're gonna say /.default. And now we're gonna do the client underscore ID equal, and then let's do HTTP. So what I'm always doing with stuff like this is that I'm gonna use HTTP utility dot URL encode the client ID thing. Plus, and the last one is, wow, let's see if I can, client underscore secret equal. I'm going to do the exact same thing again. HTTP utility.url encode client secret. In parentheses, boom. And because I didn't use the other content type, that was probably stupid. But no, I know why. That's magic. We're not using magic in this video. We're only using hard work, or not that much hard work. So we're gonna tell that the content dot headers dot content type is equal a new, and then we use the media type header value class and pass a, and this is weird, but it's called application /www-form-url encoded. So now we got the right content type for our header. And that's pretty much it. So we're now at line, well, we have 3 statements, but let's so at line 4 now, but one of them was off 4 line. So what we can do now is simply say response equal, and then we'll await the client dot post async, and you can see the way it's actually guessed correctly here. So we're gonna pass the URL and we're gonna pass our content. Maybe let's just print this out. Actual content read as async. So then we're gonna wait again. How about we run this thing? What's the worst thing that can happen? Well, the worst thing that could happen is that we get a token. How about that? So you see that we get JSON back. It says token type bearer expires in access token, and then bam, that's a token. This is actually pretty cool. So instead of this guide, let's do, say, if response is successful status code. We're totally not going to waste time testing for errors if we don't have to. So that was JSON. So let's create a JSON object called result and do jobject.parse. And that will be response dot, what was it called? Response dot content dot read as string. And then we gotta await that to actually get it to do something. So now we have the result as a JSON object. So let's create, say, string bearer token equal result. I think it was called access token. To string. I think it was called access token. We'll figure that out in a minute. Now it giving me a green squiggly line because I haven't really tested. This could be null. So this would, and then not should be a nullable type, and we don't care at this point. Okay, So now we have a, let's see if we still have a token here. How about that? Let's run this guy. And I don't know why it always opens on the other screen, but we got a token. So that's pretty good at this point. That was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're within limit of a video, I think. Okay, so now we need to figure out if we can use this for anything. So let me go back to BC for a second here. Oh, that admin guy. This is Microsoft. They're always updating apps in the evening here. I will actually just go to the simple object designer. This is sneak peek. This is the next version. We can do cool things in it. Yeah, Microsoft has updated something. We don't care about that because you can add new tables and stuff and expose them easily. So here is a table with pets, and this is exposed as an API, not as a web service, as an API. Let's see if we can access it with basic authentication. Come on, BC. Maybe we cannot. I think I did it here before. Oh, there it is. Oh, come. Huh. So you see this just returns some JSON with some pets. So let's grab that URL. This is totally the URL we're going to use. So let's do string URL 2 equal this guy. And now we already know that HTTP client, so let's create a test client as a new HTTP client. And in order to, we don't need the base URL here. In order to use the token, we need to supply that in the header. So we can do test client dot default request headers dot add, and then this is where I always go bad. Authorization. And the way you pass a token is that you say bearer, capital B, space, and then we add our token. So now this one is ready to go. And we can just say var result equal. Come on, equal. Await test client dot get async URL 2. It's pretty clever because that's the one we just created here. So this is nice. Wow, asterisk. If result is successful status code, then we're totally gonna do a console write line and await result dot, oh man, it's dot content dot reader. I said no magic, and then this AI thing is writing the code for me. But nonetheless, let's see if it works. I'll hit a fire. Comes onto another screen, and bam, we have our JSON out of Business Central. So let's repeat that. So in order to do a call, so let's go this from in order to do the call to the web service, you pass the bearer token, just like you normally did when you said you would go basic here and then a MIME encoded username colon password. But in this case, we'll do bearer. To get the token, we call the login service. We send those 4 values. So we call The URL has the tenant ID. Then we say grant type is client credential, scope is API Microsoft API.businesscentral.dynamics.com/.default and pass the client ID and the client secret. We call that, we get a JSON back when we extract the access code out of the JSON. And that's it. So in less than a screen here, counted everything, including stuff that we probably don't need up here. Let me remove these. I don't think I need them. So less than 40 lines of code to get the token and use the token. No magic, apart from the crazy. Let me guess what you are gonna code magic. So I don't think that site-to-site OAuth is that intimidating. I am currently testing a new version of BCCL that uses it. We have several things at eFocus that is already using site-to-site, and it's very reliable. And now you've seen my approach, 40 lines of code instead of megabytes upon megabytes of DLLs added. Your mileage may vary. You might prefer that kind of magic. I prefer less code if I can. Anyway, I hope you will actually subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments below if this is helpful. This specific piece of code will end up on the GitHub. The URL is down below if you want to reuse it. Anyway, I will see you in the next video. But if you need more than that one, go watch this one because that's a good one. See you later. Bye.